We're in the middle of a series on Jesus, and we're talking a lot about Jesus because Jesus, like we said, has kind of got things pretty figured out. In fact, in most situations in your life, if you had a little more Jesus, it probably would have went a little better. You know, if I could have just acted a little more like Jesus there, this probably would have been a little bit better, or that would have been a little better. We'd probably storm off less from our families, from getting in a fight with our family. We would probably rage less often when we don't get something at our job or a promotion or something like that. We'd flip less tables after disagreeing with Cody at church on Sunday. If we had a little more Jesus, if we acted like Jesus a little more often, our life would actually probably be a little bit better. So we're spending time talking about Jesus. Specifically, we're in the middle of a series talking about thinking like Jesus, thinking like Jesus. We're going to try to see, what does Jesus think about the Bible, about marriage, about money, about politics, and about prayer. And last week we talked about the Bible and how Jesus viewed the Bible as a story, as a narrative. And he viewed himself as a part of that story. And so what he believed to be right and wrong, what he believed was his mission, what he believed was the answer to different life situations, he went back to the Bible and said, well, how would this work in the story? Would this be congruent with what's come before? Would this fit into what has already happened? Today, we're talking about, what does Jesus say about marriage? What does Jesus think about marriage? And we're actually going to see in Jesus' discussion on marriage that he actually goes back to the story. He goes back to the Bible and says, well, my views on marriage need to be influenced. They need to be congruent. They need to fit into what the story says. Marriage. What does Jesus say about marriage? At some level, at some point, we are all connected to marriage. Most of us here are married or have been married. Those of us who have never been married or aren't married right now eventually probably will be married. For the few of us that might never, ever, ever be married, that's fine. That's fine. But you know people intimately who are married. Okay, we all have some connection. We all are a part of marriage somehow. And marriage is hard. Marriage is hard. Doesn't mean it's not great, doesn't mean it's not full of joy and adventure and it's amazing, but it's also very difficult. In fact, at times it can be very hurtful. Hurtful. And why is it? Why do we get hurt in our marriages? See, here's the thing. God created marriage. God made marriage. And when God makes something, he doesn't make it kind of halfway. He doesn't make it like, yeah, this is great if you are willing to be hurt a little bit. No, he made it perfect. But the problem is we are now broken. And so we go about marriage in a way that doesn't really fit what it was designed to do. God built marriage and said, this is the way it's supposed to be. And we go about it in our broken way, and that's not exactly what it's supposed to do. And anytime you do something in a way that it wasn't designed to work, there's a high likelihood you get hurt, right? Like you eat chicken that's raw, you're going to get sick. That's not what it's supposed to do. You're supposed to cook it. And if you don't cook it, you're going to get sick. You take a fork and you put it in an outlet, you're going to hurt yourself. Okay, that's not what you're supposed to do. That's not where that goes. That's not what that's designed for. You hurt yourself. So don't do that. If we do something in a way it wasn't designed to do, we get hurt. And unfortunately, we do that with marriage a lot. So what is it about marriage that hurts us? What is it that we're doing in marriage that causes us pain sometimes and damage? Well, see, the thing is, we have boxes. We have boxes in our marriage. The first box that all of us have is our desires box. All right, our desires box. These are all the things that you want out of your marriage. These are all the things you want in your life. These are your wants and your desires, okay? So in your marriage, you have a certain idea about how many of these you're going to have, all right? And you have a certain idea about how many children we're going to have. 1, 2, 3, none, whatever. And I have a certain desire for children. So you have a certain idea about how much of that you're going to have. You have a certain idea about what kind of life you're going to live, what kind of car I'm going to drive, what I'm going to be able to afford and not afford, the kind of the standard of living. This is the way it always was. This is the way it was in Daddy's house, or this is the way I've always had it. So I have a certain desire about how I'm going to live. We have certain desires about how much we're going to make, how much I'm going to make, how much my spouse is going to make. I have a certain desires about what I want, I want my income to be, and those kinds of things. Not very much. We have certain desires about who's going to do what chores, and what I'm responsible for, and what you're responsible for, and the way it was when I grew up, and the way I kind of figured it would be when we got married. And we have certain desires about what we're going to do for there. We have certain desires about our schedules, our time. 6 means 6, okay? When we're leaving now, it means this. And when we're going to do this here, and we're going to do that there. And I have a certain desire for time, and you have a different desire. We have different desires and what we want when it comes to our schedules and our time. We all come into marriage with desires, with things we want to have happen. But at some point, and maybe it was years after you got married, maybe it was months, maybe it was like when you got back from the honeymoon, maybe it was when you said, I do. At some point, our desires changed into expectations. And at some point, we stopped desiring things and we started expecting things. I no longer want a certain standard of living. I expect us to have that. And I no longer want a certain schedule. I expect us to be on a certain schedule. I no longer want for you to do this and me to do this. I no longer want this to be your responsibility and mine. I expect it to be your responsibility. I expect this to be my responsibilities. I no longer want a certain amount of kids, or I no longer want a certain income. I expect that that's the way it's going to happen. And our desires change into expectations. And when that happens, whenever it is, it's at some point when our desires change into expectations, our marriage takes a hit. Because here's the thing, desires, we all have them, okay? This is what I want. This is what and here's the thing, and this may come as a shock. I've never been anyone other than me, okay? So what I want is very natural and normal, okay? This is what I want. Everyone's got desires. The problem is that desires are all based around I. What I want, what I need, what can I get? And when we take this focus on I and we put it in a marriage, I becomes I expect. Now I want, but I expect. It turns into an I marriage. Desires, they're okay. I desire, let's just say, for example, I desire a neat home. Like I want things to be neat. Okay, like if you've seen like the bushes in front of my house, you know I don't have a high priority on neatness, okay? But let's just say I want things neat. So one of my desires is when I get off work and I come home, I want the house to be kind of neat. I would like that, okay? If I get off work, I come home, I walk through the front door, and everything's put away, and everything's nice, and everything's in order, that's awesome. That's amazing. Honey, you did such an incredible job. Thank you so much. This means so much to me. It's this great blessing. It's this great gift. This was kind of what I wanted to have happen, and it happened, and that's amazing. Thank you so much. But if it's an expectation, if I expect that the house will be in order when I get home, and I walk in, and for the most part, things are. But if it's an expectation, then, well, Tiffany, come here for a second. You see this, Tiffany? You see this right here? You see this? What's this doing? What's this doing here? You're slacking, honey. You're not holding up your end of the deal. You could do better. What are you doing? You're not pulling your weight because in a desire, if it's neat, that's great, that's wonderful. And an expectation, anything less than 100% is below expectations. When we turn our desires into expectations in marriage, we look for the worst in each other. You look for the worst in your spouse. Because this has to be met perfectly for you to be average. If you make the household nice and neat for me when I come home, you are doing your job. It's an expectation. You're not a great spouse. You're a normal spouse. You're an average spouse. Because I expect it. And anything less is below expectations. 99%, you're missing that 1%. You're still below average now. We look for the worst in each other when our desires turn into expectations in our relationships. So, when we start expecting things from our spouse, we end up with an I marriage, a marriage that's focused on me and what I want and what I need. The thing about an I marriage is there's only a few ways an I marriage ends. First of all, the first way is that you leave. You leave. One of the ways an I marriage can go is that you leave. Why? Because your spouse can't ever meet your expectations. Over and over again, for weeks and months and years, they just constantly fall short of what you want from your husband, what you want from your wife. And so what do? I'm done with it. And then what do? I'm going to go find somebody else. And I'm going to meet them, and it's going to be great, and I'm going to hoist all this onto them. And all of a sudden, after a few years, I get into my second marriage, and I wonder, why does my second marriage feel a lot like my first marriage? Well, because you took your expectations and you did the same thing to the second person. Another way an iMarriage ends is that you dominate. You dominate. This is what I want, this is what I expect, and this is what's going to happen. And you nag, and you complain, you critique, you yell, you do whatever you can to make sure that it happens your way in the house, that make sure it happens your way in the relationship. And eventually, the other person says, oh, I've had enough of this, I'm done. Okay, you have it your way. You have it your way, we'll do things your way, and if that's what's going to make you happy, fine. Now, here's what's dangerous about this. The domination type marriage is a marriage that ends and one party's completely blindsided by it. Because, and again, this may be a shocker, you have always been you. And it's easy for you to be you. It's easy for you to be you. I never wake up in the morning, go to the mirror and say, Cody, you got to try harder to be Cody today. You were messing up on being Cody yesterday. You can do better today, Cody. I never do that. It's easy for me to be me. And so in a marriage, in a relationship that I dominate someone else and things start going my way, I think it's great. I think it's great. Yeah, we got a great relationship. We've got a great marriage. Everything's wonderful because everything's going my way. And it's easy for me to be me. But in those marriages, the other side of that coin, it's frustration. It's frustrating always doing things their way and never my way. And these are marriages that last a little while, but 7 to 10 years in, these marriages are the ones that explode. And one party says, I don't understand what happened. I thought we were great. The third way that an iMarriage can develop is by compromise. You compromise. Now, generally, compromise is a good thing. I'm not saying a compromise is necessarily a bad thing. But a compromised marriage is still an I-centered marriage. Because here's what a compromised marriage sounds like. You have your time, I have my time. You have your space, I have my space. You have your stuff, I have my stuff. Your money, my money. Your part of the house, my part of the house. And what a compromised marriage is we tried to do things together. We tried our money, we tried our time, we tried our space, and it just didn't work. We fought all the time. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some pretty clear boundaries here. This is your stuff, this is my stuff. I won't touch your stuff, you don't touch my stuff. We'll be fine. The problem is that a compromised marriage is not the way God built marriage, and that's why in a compromised marriage, people still get hurt. A compromised marriage isn't really a marriage, it's just roommates, really. Just two people living together. You have your things, I have my things. An iMarriage doesn't work. It's a very human way of going about marriage, about relationships. What can I get out of the relationship is constantly what people ask in an iMarriage. As soon as you switch over to an iMarriage, you lose all intimacy and love. All intimacy and love go out the door when we begin to think through what I expect, what I demand, what is my expectation in marriage, what can I get out of marriage. Love and intimacy leave. And the reason is because expectations are based on debt. You owe me. You owe me. They owe me this, okay? Because, they promised when we were dating, or they promised me at some point, they said they would do this, they said they would provide me with this, act this way, they said they would behave this way, whatever it is, but they owe me. And there's no love and intimacy in a debt-based relationship. That's why you never get a fragrance-scented love letter from your mortgage company, okay? You don't get a letter that says, we are so, thrilled and glad that we got your payment last month. In fact, you've been with us these many years, and that's just so wonderful thing. We've got to know each other so much, and we value and appreciate you. You are such a beautiful person, or you're such a handsome fellow, or your family is so great. In fact, we want you to have this gift card so you and your wife can go out to eat because we love you so much. In fact, we're really concerned and caring about you. If you would tell us what your kids like, we'd get them something as well because we love you so much. Signed your mortgage company. You don't get those, okay? You don't get those. In fact, you get just kind of a standardized, normal, this is what you did, it was good, you met expectations, you paid your debt, you did that. And the only time you get personalized treatment is if you mess up. If you mess up, then you'll get a personalized letter. In fact, you could try for hours to get a hold of the right person to talk about, to dispute something. But if you mess up too much, you'll get a personalized phone call as well. Because that's a debt-based system. There's no love, there's no intimacy. And in fact, that relationship is what a lot of marriages turn into. It's a debt-based system, and the only time we have personalized contact is when one of us messes up. And then I will give you a very personalized, detailed, not very pleasant conversation, letter, whatever. See, when we start to expect, when we turn into an iMarriage and we have expectations, love and intimacy are jettisoned from the marriage. And this is why it does not work. The iMarriage is a very human way of doing marriage. God created marriage, though, and he actually has a way to do it. Jesus in Matthew chapter 19, that's what text we're going to be in today. Matthew chapter 19, Jesus is actually asked a question about marriage. And what Jesus does is he goes back to the source. He goes back to the foundation. What did God design marriage to do? Because the question he's asked actually sounds like a very modern iMarriage type of question. And Jesus says, no, let's talk about what God designed marriage to be. Matthew chapter 19, we're going to start in verse 3 here. It says this: some Pharisees tried to trap him with this question: should a man be allowed to divorce his wife for any reason? Now, again, that is a very iMarriage, that's a very me-focused type of question. Can I just, for any reason, I mean, if I'm done with my spouse, if I'm done with my wife, if I'm done with them, I don't want any more to do with them, can I just get rid of them? They don't make me happy anymore. They don't meet expectations anymore. I'm not getting what I used to get out of this relationship. So is it okay if I get rid of them? Is it okay if I get rid of them? In fact, there were actually debates during that time about what was good grounds for divorce. And one fairly popular group actually said, if your wife burns your food or if she loses her attractiveness, that's a good enough reason to get rid of her. Because I'm not getting what I used to get out of this relationship. And the marriage is still all about me. I have expectations. I expect my food not to be burnt. I expect you to maintain a certain level of attractiveness. And if that doesn't happen, then I'm going to get a new one. Can a man divorce his wife for any reason? Jesus replies to this. Verse 4, haven't you read the scriptures? Jesus replied. They record that from the beginning, God made them male and female. And he said, this explains why a man leaves his father and mother and are united into one, and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. Since they are no longer two, but one, let no one split apart what God has joined together. Jesus' answer is to go back to the beginning. In fact, he goes to Genesis 2, and he quotes from Genesis 2, and he says, God made them male and female, and they were designed to join together and to be one. And iMarriage is not what it's supposed to look like. In fact, marriage isn't supposed to be an iMarriage. It's supposed to be a you marriage. Now, maybe you thought I was going to say a we marriage. It's not supposed to be an iMarriage. It's supposed to be a we marriage. A we marriage is a good step. I'm going to sound like I'm Irish or something. A we marriage. A we marriage is a good step in the right direction. It's a good step in the right direction. But it's not far enough. See, a we marriage is still not what God had in mind. In a we marriage, it sounds like this. We're going to come together and we're going to build a life and we're going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to work together to forward our marriage, to forward our cause. And that, again, that's better than an iMarriage. But the problem is a we marriage is a 50-50 marriage. I'll come halfway and do my part. You come halfway and do your part. We'll meet in the middle. We'll hold hands. We'll walk down and we'll do great. It'll be great. But in a 50-50 marriage, it always leads to one group, one party, one spouse checking up on the other. Right? I'm going to do my part. Well, things still don't feel quite right. Let me see what you're doing. Well, I came 50, you only went 30. And here's the other person standing there, and they go, no, I'm 50 right now. You haven't come the rest of the way. You need to come more. And this guy, well, no, I've already went my way. In fact, if you're not going to come any further, I'm going to take a step back. I don't need to go any further. If you're doing 30, I'm doing 30. And then you get the other person over here. Well, no, now you're doing 30. I'm still doing 50. I'll take a step back. And in a we marriage, it's a good step in the right direction, but it leads to we're going to come together and we're going to do great things. And I'm going to make sure, though, that you do your part. I'll do my part. You do your part. Let's make sure, though, that you're doing your thing. And it leads to checking up. It leads to, are you getting this right? And it leads to marriage breaking down. No, God designed marriage to be a you marriage. In a you marriage, your focus is on your spouse. This is the way God designed marriage to work, and it is where all your love and your intimacy is found. When you are in a you-focused relationship, all your love and intimacy is found by focusing on the other person. This is why when you were dating, you had all kinds of love and intimacy. See, when you're dating, your focus is on your date. I want to know more about you. I want to know how you're doing. I want to know what your interests and your goals and your desires are. I want to meet those. I want to help you out. I want to, I want to make you happy. I want to make you full of joy, and I want your world to be better. And the focus is all on your date. But when you get married, the focus becomes on the marriage. I want our marriage to do okay. And it becomes less about the spouse and more about this concept of a marriage. In fact, that's why in a lot of marriages that are struggling, when they go to counseling, you'll hear things like, well, I just want the marriage to be healthy. I just want the marriage to do well. And the problem with that is that I can always go get another the marriage. I can always go get another the marriage. I can never go get another Tiffany. I can never go get another Tiffany. I can go get another the marriage. And honestly, in a you marriage, I could care less how the marriage is doing. I could care less how healthy the marriage is. I want Tiffany to be doing well. I want her to be succeeding. I want her to be happy. I want her to be full of joy. I want her world to be better. The marriage, the concept of the marriage, that's less relevant than how are you? Because the way that God designed marriage is for us to focus on our spouse. The focus shifts off the marriage and onto the person. Jesus says that this is God's design plan for marriage. The way marriage is supposed to work is when two people seek to become one person. And the way that happens is not by stopping in the middle. See, when we meet in the middle, I do 50-50. It's not two people becoming one. It's two people getting close together. Two people getting close together. I've done my part. You come over here close to me. We'll do great. But that's not what marriage is supposed to be. Marriage is supposed to be about two people becoming one. And the only way that works is if it's 100-100 marriage. My focus is on you. My focus is on my spouse. And I'm going to do everything I can for them. I'm not going to check up on them. I'm not going to worry about how much they're doing. I'm not going to be concerned if they're not going all the way, because that's where marriage breaks down. No, my focus is on them. I'm going to do everything I can, 100%, to help them out. That's where oneness is found. That's where oneness is found. God designed marriage to be about oneness, and when we try to do it any other way, when we try to meet in the middle, when we try to expect our spouse to do certain things, train them to do certain things, however we want to put it, when we try to do it a different way than seek oneness, we get it wrong, and marriage hurts us. It hurts us instead of help us. God built marriage to be this wonderful thing. Now, some of you may be sitting here this morning saying, well, Cody, that's great. That's great. I'm glad for you. It sounds perfect. I'm sure you and Tiffany have this incredible, perfect marriage. You guys are great, okay? And it's not perfect. We are pretty cute together. I think we make a pretty good married couple. But some of you may be saying, well, that sounds great, Cody, but you have not met my husband. That sounds great, Cody, but you haven't met my wife. Okay, if I don't control things a little bit, if I don't make sure that it happens, if I'm not checking up, if I don't have expectations, things would be crazy, okay? She can't handle money. And if I don't make sure that I am in control of that, if I don't make sure that I have certain expectations when it comes to that, it would be crazy. He cannot assert himself. And if I wasn't poking a little bit, if I didn't shake him up a little bit, he would never get anything done. He would never succeed. Now, see, it sounds great, Cody, but you haven't met my spouse. Jesus said that marriage, it doesn't work unless we're shooting for oneness. But the problem is that we think that they have to deserve it first. They have to earn it first. My spouse doesn't deserve oneness. They're not evil, okay? They're not like a terrible person or abusive, but they don't deserve me to go 100%. They don't deserve that because they only ever give 50. They only ever give 50%. Why should I go? They don't deserve that. Paul actually talks about this. He plays off of the same passage that Jesus was playing off of. In fact, he kind of echoes Jesus' words. In Ephesians chapter 5, Paul goes on, he says, guys, it's not about what they deserve and don't deserve. See, Jesus said marriage is built for oneness, but some of us think our spouse doesn't deserve oneness. And this is what Paul has to say about that. Ephesians 5, he starts in verse 21. This is the start of the section about marriage. He's about to talk about marriage for the next several verses. He starts in verse 21. He says, and further submit to one another because they deserve it. No, that's not what he says. Submit to your spouse because of how pretty they are, because of how funny they are, because of how financially successful they are, because of how smart they are, because of how kind and caring they are. No, submit to one another out of reverence, out of respect, out of thankfulness, out of love for Christ. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Then he goes on, he says the same thing to both parties after that. Verse 22, for wives, this means submit to your husbands because they're so great. No. For wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Verse 25, for husbands, this means love your wives because they're so nice and kind. No. For husbands, this means love your wives just as Christ loved the church. He gave up his life for her. Over and over again, Paul says, don't get this wrong. Marriage is designed for oneness, but it doesn't matter whether or not you think your spouse deserves it. No, you do this. You seek oneness in your marriage. You ask the question, what can I do for you? You look to lean into your spouse. You look to support and help them and do everything you can for your spouse, not because they deserve it, but because God deserves it. Paul says that if you do this, it's not because they're so great, it's because God's so great. I mean, and God is great, right? I mean, he's great. He's awesome. He's done so much for us. He's forgiven us. He died for us. He created us. He sustains us. It's so great. Thank you, God. How in the world could I ever say thank you to you, God? What can I do? And God looks down and says, I want you to submit, to serve, to love your spouse. Well, wait, God, isn't there some way me and you can have a good relationship? Isn't there some way that I can bless you and you can bless me and we can be close and I can be doing this whole Christian thing and not have the best marriage? No. No, if you have any reverence, love, or respect for me, love, serve, and submit to your spouse. See, it doesn't matter if they deserve it or not. It doesn't matter how great they are or how sometimes kind of a slacker they are. It doesn't matter how handsome and wonderful and kind they are or how maybe not they are. No, we don't do this because they deserve it. Paul says you seek oneness in your marriage because that's what God has asked. And that puts the thing squarely on you and God. I did my part, God. I'm going to continue to do my part. And sometimes they might not do their part. Sometimes they may. But really, that's irrelevant because I'm doing my part. They can answer to you. They can answer to you. And when we get to see you in heaven, when we get to that point and we're there, I can look you in the eye and say, God, I loved you so much that I did everything I could in my marriage. And you can go talk to my husband. You can go talk to my wife. You can ask them the same question. But I'm telling you, I did everything I could because I love you so much. I served, I loved, and I submitted to my spouse. God designed marriage a certain way. Designed it for oneness. We've got all kinds of things that'll get in the way of that. And as long as we let stuff get in the way of oneness, as long as we let stuff get in the way of focusing on the person, our spouse, marriage will hurt us. It'll hurt us. But if we don't, if we let all that stuff go, if we let God rule in our lives, if we focus on our spouse, if we seek oneness in our marriage, it will unlock everything that God designed it to do. And it will be one of the most incredible experiences of your life. Let's pray. God, we love you. At times it will be hard, at times it will be difficult to follow you. God, I just pray right now that we can realize that our relationships are not somehow separated from our relationship with you. That our earthly relationships here are somehow not in a different section of our lives, or not off in a corner, and somehow not related to our relationship with you. That God, our relationship with you influences every other relationship we have. God, I pray that you give us the strength to see this and the strength to do it. That God, we might be known as a people who value marriage, who place this incredible value on loving each other, on serving each other, on directing our attention and love and care to our spouse. That God, the church might be known as a place where marriage is valued, where marriage is held up high. We love you so much, God, and we just pray you give us the strength to do this. It's in Jesus' name that we pray.